from the wider industry started to pour in music. Some artists discussed how power dynamics aren't frequently questioned, while others cautioned against rewriting history without considering the entire context of music. The tension between these music points of view is what drives the drama that characterizes reality television. And friends on both sides were compelled to respond to questions they may not have wanted to by being pulled into comment sections. The timing of this event made it extraordinarily intense. The past, long thought to be resolved, seemed to spring to life once more. Many people asked why these specific scenes were being aired at this time. Music theories varied from a personal quarrel to a more broad critique of industry society. Whatever the cause, the impact was irrefutable. Long-standing rumors reappeared as unsolved problems that continued to exist rather than as verified realities. Individuals started going over interviews again, contrasting music remarks, and pointing out distinctions they had missed before. Celebrities were not the only individuals with emotional stakes. It was mixed, with some fans who had admired these celebrities as children expressing disappointment and others expressing admiration. The notion that music is not a straightforward story. This poignant experience elevated the documentary above mere amusement. It was brought up for discussion, and each tape seemed to pose the same subliminal query. What happens when the past is just changed rather than really addressed? As the story progressed, it became evident that the documentary's strongest point was suggestion rather than statement. Instead of judging music, 50 Cent presented himself as a curator of moments, allowing spectators to make their own judgments about what should be revealed and what should be left out. That choice reminded everyone that history does not just music disappear because it is no longer fashionable. And instead of accusations, it brought back memories of Doza's previous music. As fans waited for a direct answer from anybody involved, the number of responses continued to rise. Some seemed satisfied with the mystery, while others demanded more details. Conversations continued, and feelings remained unresolved as a result of the lack of prompt responses. What started out as a documentary became a cultural moment where the power of silence was equal to that of words by the time this section of the story had settled. The Snort's audience was left with a curious mix of familiarity and suspicion, and everything appeared to be different. Although nothing had been changed officially, viewers were told that some stories never really end. And once the past was rekindled through introspection rather than disclosure, they simply wait for the right time to be told again. Surprisingly, friends, ex-partners, and even distant co-workers were requested to retell music memories they wouldn't have remembered for years as viewers moved past their first shock music and started to focus on the responses that followed the documentary's publication. The drama contained that avoidance, with some choosing to talk cautiously and others avoiding the subject completely. The response seemed like a new thread in an already complex story. And supporters are shocked not only by the music on display, but also by those who remain silent afterward. In the comment music sections, users recreated timelines by comparing interviews from various eras, slowing down footage and repeating facial expressions. Online clips were uploaded with subtitles, asking questions. Emotions were raging, with some viewers arguing that the documentary was just looking at history through an artistic perspective, while others believed it was subtly music challenging how authority had shaped public memory. The most intense debates focused on short but important family occasions without a verdict being music rendered, with one famous comment comparing it to watching a courtroom where the audience could debate the evidence on the table. Previously depicted scenes of success were now viewed as stressful images. Onlookers wondered whether certain stories had been kept out of the public eye for too long and what it was like to grow up surrounded by expectations and celebrity. The narrative was only made more compelling by the fact that the public's image of the family was divided, supporters calling for respect and critics claiming that unsolved concerns need to be taken into consideration. Experts in the subject provided insightful analysis on that split, with some stating that music traveling back in time was inevitable in a society that constantly reevaluates its symbols. Nevertheless, cautions of this kind piqued interest, with others warning that selective narrative might make it hard to discern between suggestion and commentary. The scene sequence grew to matter as much as the events themselves, and people wanted to know why these particular occasions were chosen and where they were placed in relation to the music. Music rumors about inspiration started to circulate behind the scenes. Was this about cultural reflection, personal competition, or something else entirely? Though none of these explanations were verified, their dissemination contributed to the story's continuation. They varied from timing in accordance with shifting industrial ideals to a reaction to long-standing tensions. Fans who felt more like players than spectators filled in the spaces with their own interpretations as the documentary shifted its focus from what it showed to the discussions it inspired. The viewers' hypothetical dialogue conversations that may have taken place off-camera provided another component. It was hard to tell the difference between emotion and fact in these made-up scenarios, which gave the play a reality TV vibe. Some imagined private meetings that ended without a conclusion, while others imagined confrontations that never occurred in public, because the documentary encouraged this kind of interaction without ever guiding it. Feeling snorts were running high. Music as days passed, reactions from younger audiences gave a new depth. Many admitted that they had never heard of these history before. The dispute grew more heated as a result of this generational transition, as they perceived the documentary as introducing a complicated music heritage rather than reliving past experiences. The conflict between skepticism and nostalgia was evident across a variety of platforms. While critics concentrated on power disparities, music, and silence, new viewers questioned stories they had never personally experienced, while seasoned viewers felt protective of memories. The documentary, according to some enthusiasts, was about ambition and perseverance. Because no side could claim total control, negotiations failed to result in a consensus. The audience as a whole encountered emotional conflict music in addition to interpersonal difficulties. They battled mistrust and adoration. At the same time, music couldn't decide which emotion was more important. The documentary was noteworthy for its reworking of responsibility. The audience was positioned as decision-makers rather than assigning blame or rendering verdicts, which appeared deliberate and dangerous. Supporters debated whether this approach was fair or deceptive, with some praising it for recognizing viewers' intellect and others denouncing it for stirring controversy without offering a solution. The tension was a reflection of the dispute about Diddy's past. Music came between these points of view when media outlets saw the buzz. They focused on reactions rather than discoveries. The public's reaction music was highlighted in the headlines, which also showed how soon previous stories made a comeback to popular lists. Commentators noted that the lack of specific claims made it more difficult to dismiss the conversation. When there were no particular claims to contest, the focus shifted to perception and memory, because impression can have a greater influence on legacy than evidence. Emotions were running high. Conversations on corporate culture were also impacted. Some musicians talked about how authority was formerly unquestioned and how music progress necessitates rethinking, while others warned against letting conjecture dominate success. Because of these conflicting responses, the narrative remained unresolved but balanced, and fans closely monitored the issue to see whether anybody directly involved would provide explanation. The documentary didn't change throughout. However, its importance appeared to change daily. Every new response provided background and music. Every silence raised suspicions. It was increased attention, not new information that made the past seem alive. Viewers realized that stories do not evaporate simply because time passes. They persist, waiting for a moment to resurface. By now, the documentary had become a mirror, reflecting the views of those who looked at it. Questions were identified by people looking for accountability. People searching for a legacy found complexity in music. One thing became evident as the discussions proceeded for another week, and sentiments remained unpleasant because of the unresolved nature of it all. The choice music of what to reveal had succeeded in rekindling discussion, guaranteeing that Diddy's past remained a part of the current discussion rather than a closed chapter. The tale moved into a more intimate setting, where a lot of viewers' feelings triumphed over logic as the discussion. Music wouldn't stop. Music supporters imagined what it would be like to have your past reenacted for millions of others. Rather than merely studying changes or talking about intent, Since the documentary simply provided exposure rather than consolation, emotions were running high, particularly since there is no context for such acts. Each tape seemed more important than what was broadcast on television. And Diddy's followers began to express their views more strongly, asserting, "Selective narrative can skew reality." They contended that music carried the risk of oversimplifying complex lives. When presented in bits and pieces without full context, others resisted, arguing that strong personalities had been overprotected by circumstance. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Music as a result of this back and forth. Fans are shocked by how quickly admiration turned into conflict, not between celebrities, but between crowds, when viewers began drawing parallels between music, personal sacrifice, and career accomplishment. The emotive tension escalated, putting online friendships to the test as individuals chose sides. Scenes of celebration were reframed as lonely moments. The laughter was unpleasant, and the applause was empty. The public's perception of the family was divided due to the sudden reappearance of old dynamics rather than new ones. And many questioned whether ambition came at a cost that was never fully acknowledged. Costs. After years of watching late-night programming and response recordings, people debated if silence was a sign of exhaustion or guilt. Conversations examined every option and gave once fading rumors a new lease. Music. Writers frequently reminded audiences that nothing music was confirmed. The drama was kept intact by striking a balance between caution and curiosity. As sentiments were running high and conjecture filled in the gaps left by the music documentary, the absence of answers became a tale unto itself, subject to innumerable interpretations. Speakers from the industry attempted to change the focus of the conversation to accountability. While some stressed the risk of allowing implication to take the place of fact, others argued that looking back at the past was essential for personal development. Despite being intended to quell the storm, these remarks frequently had the opposite effect. The suspense grew as people wondered who was protecting whom and why certain stories never seemed to have a satisfactory ending. While music fans scrutinized every word in an effort to uncover deeper meanings, after the show aired, viewers' perceptions of discourse continued to shift. People envisioned private conversations, music that may have occurred. Some imagined defensive reactions, while others felt regret. The situation became a living drama as a result of these imagined conversations that blurred the boundaries between reality and story. Important characters' music, lack of formal response, only served to exacerbate this impression. As the music days stretched into weeks, the story's silence transformed into a character who spoke loudly without uttering a word. Beyond just being entertaining, the documentary influenced discussions about memory, power, and who gets to write history. This music age divide complicated the battle. Younger listeners wondered why some people were certainly acclaimed, while older fans considered how stories had been formed over time. Many viewers started to show empathy because, although having opposing ideas about what was true, both sides felt they were protecting it, which resulted in intense emotions rather than merely passing judgment. While some believe that ongoing surveillance may distort anyone's life, others objected, arguing that influence entails accountability. The contradiction between empathy and accountability was one of the major issues that came out of the discussion. Fans are surprised that a single music documentary might reignite arguments that seemed settled. Years ago, in response music to this change, media coverage shifted to emphasize people's reactions music rather than what was displayed. Headlines emphasized conflict, disagreement, and unease. Analysts say the documentary changed perspective by rephrasing familiar events, and it was successful in changing the discourse music without changing the facts. In the middle of the confusion, several voices called for restraint, cautioning everyone that speculation may put real people in risk. The ability to shape vision became an issue unto itself, posing moral problems. Music others contended that ignoring challenging questions. One documentary subtly changed the atmosphere just when people believed that Diddy's past had finally been resolved. Instead, than yelling or making outright accusations, supporters were compelled to sit, get up and ask sly, uncomfortable music questions. Selected Times wasn't a viral tirade or a blockbuster interview this time. What 50 Cent decided to showcase, and more importantly, what he refused to explain, was it music. Timelines were examined once again. Almost instantly, old discussions reappeared, and moments that many had previously overlooked now took on new significance. Fans are astounded by music because familiar parts were organized in a way that looked music intentional, rather than because anything novel was displayed. On social media, people were discussing subtext, stopping sequences, and rewatching video. "Why add this now?" a fan asked. Another said, "This feels intentional, like music wants us to remember something we forgot." There was no dramatic voice proclaiming that anything had happened, no strong statements made on TV. And viewers' emotions were running high as they tried to read between the lines, rather than depending just on the facts. The suspense was created by implication, timing, snorts, and the reactions of every viewer. Instead,